The following thoughts on Hoppe Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you. Voted as best local podcast in Tampa Bay by the Creative Loafing. You're listening to Hoppe Hour.
What up? What is happening? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe. And on the phone line from the Dave Mahoney and DK show on Mix 96.5 in Houston, Texas, Dave Farra is on the phone line. What's up, dude?
Hoppe, how you doing, man?
Dude, it's been a while, man. I first met you guys at the morning show boot camp in 2014, and I wish we got to talk longer. It wasn't until the last night around 2 a.m. It was me, you, and Jared outside, and I think Randy from Fitz in the Morning, and it was when there was that car crash, and there was those naked chicks fighting or something. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course. That was awesome. We were crime fighters that night. There was a couple of chicks brawling in the street in Chicago, and we were all stumbling back to the hotel. Maybe we'd had an adult beverage or two, perhaps.
A few.
Yeah, maybe. And there was a couple of girls that were, like, fighting in a car, like just full-on brawling with each other in a car, and we saw it at a stoplight, and we're like, okay, well, we gotta walk over there and investigate. We ended up helping the cops, like, pull these two sisters, they were twin sisters apart, and were both just hammered. And they ended up getting arrested because they're drunk. They had an empty tequila bottle in the back seat, but yeah, that was a wild time, man. It was nice to meet you at that. But like you said, it's been way too long.
Dude, I think there were we either saw some boobs or there was like a crotch shot. There was some type of nudity. I think it was a crotch shot in the back seat with because I remember Jared's like, what the hell? That's a vag or whatever. I forget how he said it, but I think there was some type of nudity with them. Like, it was insane. Like, they were brawling.
Yeah, it was just all crotch, because one of the girls had on a skirt, if you recall, and the skirt kept riding up, and so it was all just she had this little pair of underwear on, and it was just getting pushed all over the place, and it was a hot mess. Turns out they were fighting over a guy. That's what we found out. But they were sisters that were just beating the hell out of each other, and again, literally had to help the police officers pull them apart because they were clamped onto each other's hair so hard, and the cops are laughing the whole time. They thought it was hilarious too, but yeah, man, that was a wild weekend for sure.
And the best part is, that's not even the craziest thing that happens at the morning show boot camp, because you have all these egos and all these morning shows in huge cities drinking and networking. So that was nothing compared to all the wild conversations you have at the boot camp. It's hard to describe if you're not in radio, but it's just so unreal that all these big names come together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a weird thing in general, I mean, because normally it's not like, with football where, every week two teams are going to meet, and then there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to get their, into the stadium to watch them. And radio, that doesn't happen very often. In TV, that doesn't happen at all, as far as I know, where they have these seminars where all of the top talent from around the country converges into one place. And it's kind of like the Surreal Life used to be on VH1 back in the day, where everyone in the room thinks that they're the most important person there, and nobody actually is. It makes for some pretty entertaining stuff. But the boot camp just experience is, like you said, man, it's a unique one for sure.
What were some things that you learned from there? I remember the Phil Hendry panel was the one that I liked the best, because he was talking about what radio needs to do. Because a lot of those panels at times can be a little cliche, and they're the shows that do the fake prank calls, which I have no problem with, but that's not my thing. So is there anything that you remember from that boot camp?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you said. I mean, there's a mix of really good and really bad ideas. Some people are like, oh yeah, let's do War of the Roses every half an hour. You're like, shut up. What are you talking about? It's such a burnt out bit that's been done for 20 years all over America. How can anyone think that that's an original idea at this point? So that sort of thing, kind of when somebody gets up and suggests that. But there was one idea that we actually, I don't want to say stole. He offered it up, as a suggestion. If you remember the Burt Show, which is based out of Atlanta, he said that they did something called Roofie Roulette.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and he was just joking, because you can't do Roofie Roulette. You can't roofie people on your show, because Rohypnol is you can't just have Rohypnol. It's an illegal drug to possess. And so you can't be drugging people. And basically the idea was that, you have a bunch of placebos and then one little cup that has the roofies in it, and you take, everyone takes their pills, and then one person gets roofied. He was joking about that, but what we took away from that is we need to do something kind of like that. And so we did something called laxative roulette on the morning show when we were based in Las Vegas, and that ended up being pretty funny because Mahoney was the one that ended up getting the laxatives that day and basically almost pooped his pants on the air. And then we did an extension of that, and we did boner roulette as well, where all of us took a Cialis. And then we had like a massage therapist come in, and she was like giving everyone a massage. And Jared ended up getting the Cialis and it's the erection. But like the boot camp is fun, man. For all intents and purposes, it's kind of just a weekend to go out and have a bunch of drinks and network and hang out with a bunch of other people in the industry. But it seems for the most part like everyone's good-hearted and has a great time and share some ideas. And like you said, you get a chance to learn some stuff too.
What I love, too, is good old Dennis Hoff is just walking around with some of his hardworking girls just passing out business cards. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's that guy from that HBO show at night. It's just sort of funny how he just talks to everybody, God,
he's such a creep.
I know. I try to be.
Dennis Hoff is such a creep. No, there's no two ways about it. He runs a brothel, and I'm sure that everyone heard about Dennis Hoff when he was doing all of this stuff with Lamar Odom. And, it's like, if you're going to run a brothel and a celebrity ODs at your brothel, maybe you shouldn't be the first person that volunteers yourself to do interviews and spill all of the beans. I mean, isn't it supposed to be confidential if you're going to a brothel in the first place?
I never thought about that.
Especially if you're a celebrity. And so it's like Lamar Odom, you would think he would have some level of confidentiality. Most people don't want to broadcast when they're going to go to a brothel. And then he runs into what is obviously the worst experience of his life, almost killed him. And Dennis Hoff is out there, like, doing interviews about it. He's a creep, man. I don't like that guy.
I just find it weird. I don't know if you see him with all his tweets, but it's just girls at his little rundown place, and they all look run down. Like, they look like they'd be a girl that would sleep with Jax on Sons of Anarchy. Like, they're very run down, and they obviously have daddy issues. I know that's the cliche thing to say about girls that work for sex, but, I mean, come on. Like, there's no reason you would be around that guy. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. He's a dirtbag, man. And they would always pitch him to us when we were, doing the morning show in Las Vegas. It's like, you have to have him on. And, he fancies himself to be a radio broadcaster. He's not, man. He's just a brothel owner who tries to do a radio show, and I just can't stomach him. I hate guys like that kind of take the art away from doing a radio show, and they just buy their way onto the air, and then they, walk around and say that they're some sort of successful broadcaster just because they purchased their way onto the air, and then all that he's doing is just sleazing it up, and he's just a wannabe bootleg Howard Stern. It's just pathetic.
What do you think of guys like that? There's tons of radio guys, and they're the ones that have the crazy nicknames in 2016 that keep doing the Howard thing from the 90s, and they're just shock jocks. I mean, you guys are edgy, but you come up with original content, and you don't have to make fun of each other or talk about sex all day. So what do you think of these shows that are just wannabe Opies or wannabe Howards,
I just think that ship has sailed. I think that if where it's just sort of like the shock jock thing is just sailed at this point. It's over, right? I mean, back in the 90s, people had limited access to the internet. They had limited access to things like pornography, like saying shocking things on a medium that was broadcasting it anywhere was different. That's what really set Howard apart, is that he was the first one that was willing to just risk it all and just be who he wanted to be, but nobody else was doing it. Now, there is no censorship if you don't want censorship. It's not like everyone feels like that. You can't shock people anymore because you can log on to any computer and Google the most vile thing that you can possibly imagine, and there's 1,000 web pages dedicated to it. It's like to be a shock jock in this day and age, it just seems so cliche. That said, like, if you want to do kind of like a male-oriented show that does use sex as a topic, I'm fine with that too, because that is a very real thing. I don't think that everyone that talks about sex on the radio should be labeled a Howard Stern wannabe. I don't think that that's the case at all. But at the same time, there are guys out there, like you said, in 2016 that are trying to be Howard Stern, and they are trying to be like Opie and Anthony back in the day. And I just can't see anyone being successful with that formula in this day and age.
And it's not just the fact that they're trying to be shocking by ranting and giving their take on the news, but I saw it single-handedly last year when I worked in radio, where if you have talent around you, you have to treat them badly because you have to be the smartest in the room, which is why I respect your show and the shows at the boot camp is you guys are edgy, but you never need to exploit and bully people for ratings. You know what I mean?
Oh, I hate that stuff. Like if you're the person that has to be all about you, and you're constantly degrading the people around you, and you're doing the type of show. Because for me, as the host of the show, right, you know, I could sit here and just make everyone agree with me, and like have everyone around me constantly telling me that I'm right, my opinion's fantastic. Well, you know what? Who does that in real life? Like, who likes that sort of broadcast in this day and age? Like, everyone on the show, if you're doing an intelligent show, should be able to have a strong opinion, and it can be different than yours, and you don't have to beat them up and tell them they're an idiot because they don't agree with you. And so for the way that I've always done the show, that I've never even really liked the idea of being the star. I'm much more the type of environment that I grew up in is much more of an instigator. So I try to instigate fun. I try to instigate, sometimes taking things right up to the edge without going over the edge. I grew up as a big brother. I've got 3 younger brothers, and I would always see as a kid like what I could talk them into doing or what I could get them to do that maybe I wanted to do myself. And that's very much kind of the type of radio show that I do now, where I instigate, but it's all good natured. It's not. It's tongue in cheek. We're all having fun. It's never mean spirited. And I think personally that those are my favorite radio shows to listen to. And so that's the type of radio show that I want to do as well.
Now, how would you describe your show that you do on Mix 96.5? How has it been going so far?
It's good, man. So we just started in September. We started mid-September. And, like the first couple of months, there's always growing pains. No matter how long you've done radio, I've been doing radio since 2000. So going on 16 years now. It's a long time, right?
Yeah.
But even then, and even doing the morning show in its current iteration, we've all been together, full time since 2013. Mahoney and I started doing the show together back in 2009. That's also a long time. Still, there's always growing pains. You go to a new market, there's new expectations, there's new people around you, there's new bosses. There's always things that you're going to run into that are going to be challenging. It's never seamless when you move to a new city and you move to a new market. And, when we were in Las Vegas, the show did really well. And, we had a lot of success, and we also had a lot of longevity there. I was in Las Vegas from 2005 until 2015. Now, it's a solid 10 years in the same market. That's a pretty rare thing in this day and age. And, when you're in the same market for 10 years, you build some stability and you build a reputation, and people respect that. But when you pull all those roots up and you move to a new, albeit much bigger market, but a different market nonetheless, you've got to reestablish all of those things. You have to regain all of that trust and all of that respect. And, sometimes that can be a little bit of a test on everyone in the room. And so, yeah, it's been going really well. And we're already seeing things moving in the right direction from a ratings and a revenue standpoint, which is what everyone wants. But I won't say that it's been a walk in the park and everything's been perfect. There have been some challenges that we've run across that we've had to figure out.
What's it like where you go from being a top-rated show in Las Vegas, and you guys were a heritage show, you're there for almost a decade, and then you move to a major market with a ton of shows that have been there for a while. What are you guys doing to make a name for yourself so you can make a splash in the 4th biggest market?
Well, first off, it sucks. It sucks going from being the guys that have been there for everyone, that everyone likes and knows and respects. And, you've done a bunch of charity work in the market, and, you're closely tied to a bunch of organizations that do a lot of great things for the city. And, being able to, pick up the phone and make a call and say, hey, we need to use your bar or your restaurant tonight to do a fundraiser to raise money for this family because something tragic happened. That was the sort of environment that we were in Las Vegas, where if we needed to get something done because of, like I said, something tragic happening and we wanted to do a fundraiser the next day, we could pick up the phone and do that. Moving to a new market, you're right. We are the new kids in town. We're trying to figure it out. We're the ones that are making a name for ourselves here. So, yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough to have to reestablish all of those connections. It's tough to go up against shows that have been here for a long time. But, one of the things that we started doing a couple of months ago is something called Houston Love. So it's not about us. We're not trying to be the ones that do something shocking so we're on the news and everyone's talking about us. Instead, we launched an initiative called Houston Love, where we're celebrating people that are going out doing great things in the community. So if somebody goes out and does something nice and they post about it, then we take a moment and we we'll either talk about something great that they did, or, for example, for our holiday show that happened in mid-December, Rob Thomas and Fall Out Boy, the band Perry, and all these, Jamie Lawson, they all came in and played at our holiday show. And there was a little girl who was a huge fan of Rob Thomas. Well, she had donated all of her money to buy toys for less needy kids, or more needy kids, rather, around the holidays. And so her mom told us about her, and we brought her backstage, and we brought her up on stage, and she got to introduce Fall Out Boy. She's doing things like that where it's like really taking an opportunity to really brighten someone's day because they're doing something great for the city. So we're not here saying, hey, look at us. We're trying to figure out ways to champion the thing that is a lot bigger than us, and that, of course, is this enormous market that we're in and a great city that has a fantastic reputation. We just want to celebrate all of the great things that are going on here.
Now, have you seen any of the rivals, any of the guys that you've gone up against in person?
Yeah, we've interacted with a couple of them. Eric Rowe, who is the producer of the Lula and Ryan show, which is on a top 40 station, we share a decent amount of audience with them. We hung out with him a little bit at boot camp before we even knew that we got the Houston gig a couple of years ago. And then this year when we were there, we knew that we were going to Houston. But he's always been exceptionally cool. I don't know if, in Tampa, it's probably not the same. You guys have some pretty heated rivalries going on down there. But, it seems like in this day and age, in most markets, at least that I've encountered, and even at boot camp, it's like, rivalries in radio don't exist like they used to quite as much. It used to be pretty violent in some circumstances where people just hated the person that they were competing against. In this, in 2016, where there's competition every which direction they can turn, it seems like most radio people, in my experience at least, get along pretty well. And any time that I've had an interaction with somebody that whether they're a rival or not, it seems like everyone's been pretty cool.
Was there anybody who gave you advice and said that you were insane for taking this job, or was everybody pretty supportive of you guys?
The Houston gig?
Yeah.
No, there were certainly people that were, and they were mostly on the Las Vegas side, that were trying to keep us in Las Vegas. And there's people, that were a part of the CBS company even that really wanted us to stay in Vegas. And a couple of other confidants, like an old general manager that I used to have that I talked to, that really kind of said, hey, look, you've got heritage in Las Vegas. You've got a great thing going here. Why blow that up to go to a different market? Why on earth would you, leave 10 years and, the rating success and the revenue success that you've had here to go somewhere else? But, and you've seen it too, Hoppy, just moving around. When you take the biggest risks, you get the biggest rewards, right? And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you can gamble and be wrong. But I've always thought that, betting on myself, even if it is a risky move, is something that I'm willing to do. And so, moving to a new market, and it's a huge market, Houston, like you said, is the fourth biggest city in the country. Yeah, it's a challenge, and yeah, it could backfire and go terribly. I'm not really that worried about it. Even if it blows up in my face, I'm not going to be mad at myself for taking a stab at a major market like Houston.
I'm the same way. After I parted ways with the other show, I was a janitor at a gym for 7 weeks, and I applied for probably 25 jobs. And the guy, Rob, who worked on the previous show that's in town here now, pretty much referred me and got me the job. In the previous show I worked on, said that it was a lateral move and that this wasn't going to work out. And to me, that motivated me. And I went from being in the 30th biggest market to now the 19th biggest market. And I'm in a major market, not a media market. So to me in life, if you want to make it in this business, Dave, and if you want to be successful, anybody, an amateur or a pro, you need to make that move because you'll never know and you'll end up regretting it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, nobody looks back and goes, oh, when I was young and, full of piss and vinegar and, ready to take on the world, I took too many risks. No, the people that really regret it are the ones that say, I didn't take enough risks. Playing it safe has never been the way that I'm wired. Obviously I just had my first child, a little girl on Friday, this past Friday. So it's brand new to me. But, obviously that makes me go, obviously don't want to do anything that's going to screw up her future. But at the same time, I'm willing to make calculated moves. I'm willing to take risks. I've always been a gambler. I'll push the chips into the middle if I feel confident in my position. You know, you don't make stupid plays at the poker table, and you don't make stupid plays with your career. But if you've got an opportunity to jump and see something bigger, then go for it. And I've always been a big fan of fake it until you make it, man. I mean, you know, doing radio has been in my blood since I was a kid, but with all the TV ventures that I've gotten into, a lot of it, you know, I've just been flying by the seat of my pants trying to figure it out as things have gone along. And much of that has just sort of worked out because I confidently went into it, you know, and I just said, you know what, F it, I think I can do it. And, you know, sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't, but I wouldn't take any of it back.
Now, for anybody out there that's not aware of what you do in TV, what are some of the things you do for the MMA and things like that?
All right, so yeah, I mean, like I hosted the official pre-show for the UFC called Fight Day for 3 years before they did their big deal with Fox a couple of years ago, and so we actually got to travel with the UFC all over the world, and that was pretty awesome. I mean, we went all over, of course, the United States, all over Canada, but going to Tokyo, Japan was pretty unreal. Going to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, I mean, those are some pretty cool experiences. You know, since the Fox deal has come along, I haven't done as much in the MMA space, but I still executive produce the World MMA Awards, and they're actually taking place not this Friday, but next Friday in Las Vegas. It's happening at the Venetian Theater right there on Las Vegas Boulevard. It's kind of like the Oscars for the UFC where, you know, like everyone gets all dressed up in tuxes. We got a bunch of great entertainers that come in, a bunch of celebrities that come in as presenters, and we just celebrate, you know, a great year of mixed martial arts and the people that have really excelled and succeeded in 2015. And then it's going to be broadcast on Fox Sports 2 and Fox Sports Networks regionally the following Friday night. So if you want to jot that down on a calendar, if you get Fox Sports 2, it'll debut on that night on Friday, February 12th. And, you know, you'll see my face on that, and then I executive produced the whole thing. And then, you know, like I've done a bunch of other hosting stuff as well. I host a show for the Fantasy Sports Network. I'm really into daily fantasy sports. I know there's been a lot of drama going on recently with FanDuel and DraftKings and all that stuff. But I love fantasy sports. I love daily fantasy sports. There's a network out of Toronto called Fantasy Sports Network that I produce programming for, and I host programming. Just a new deal with a new network called Poker Central. We're going to be producing a couple of new series for them this year starting in May. So, I mean, I really love being on the air, and I always have. As far as mediums go, I like the act of doing radio above everything else, though. You know, radio is much more fun to me because it's off the cuff. You can do what you want. You can say what you want. And it's a very free-flowing format where it's really just top of mind, whereas TV is very structured, it's very scripted in almost every circumstance. Not always the case, but almost, 95% of shows are very well scripted out and very well thought out. What I really enjoy is producing on the television side, kind of being behind the camera and making things happen. And, the other part of that is it's awesome to be able to produce stuff and executive produce stuff where you don't always have to be the face in front of the camera, so that we're able to make money without actually having to be there hosting the programming. That's a lot of fun for me.
Do you ever find yourself burning out? Because I just got nauseous hearing everything you do, dude. I have a lot of respect for what you do. So how do you focus on not burning out?
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say it like that because, when I do find myself in downtimes, because there are downtimes, the end of the year and the beginning of the year leading up to the MMA awards are some of the busiest times of the year. So, my daughter's born on Friday. Literally 2 weeks after that, the MMA awards. I'm juggling all of these different celebrities' schedules and, fighter schedules and getting everyone into the same room on the same night, negotiating deals with the network and everything else. Like, it's a huge undertaking. But, all this, it's this frantic pace, it seems, and I travel all over the country this season for the NFL, and I hosted a bunch of programs for them. And then I also do this play-by-play for Premier Boxing Champions, which is all over the country as well. I mean, all of that stuff is fun, though. It's all stuff that I enjoy. I've been a fan of MMA for a long time. I've been a fan of poker for a long time. I talked about my love of fantasy sports. I love football. I love boxing. It's all this stuff that I love. If I was flying around hosting stuff that I hated or that I wasn't interested in, you're right, I would burn out. It would be exhausting. I don't sleep a lot. And, even when, I'm away from radio, I'm still working constantly. I actually end up working probably between 12 and 16 hours a day, but it doesn't feel like work. Like it all feels like fun, and it ends up paying really well on top of it. And I feel very fortunate that, I wake up every day and I do what I actually love to do. And that's not me just being cliche and saying, oh, that's how I feel. That's how I want it to be. Like, I literally wake up every day and do exactly what I want to do. And in many regards, I am my own boss. I make my own schedule. Obviously, I have to be on air, the times that I do the fantasy sports show and the times that I do the morning radio show. But outside of that, like, I can at any point, I can adjust anything to whatever I need. If I've got a daughter being born, or if I've got friends in town or family in town, or there's some cool event that I want to go do, I can control all of that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, there is the potential to burn out, but I've never felt like I am burning out at all because I love everything that I do.
Did you ever think you were going to reach this point where you would be this successful? Like, let's say when you first went into radio, or was there a point where you almost quit or got discouraged?
No, not really, man. I mean, that's the thing is, like you say, do you ever feel like you would be this successful? I don't feel successful. And I think that's a big part of it. You always have to stay hungry, and you always have to stay humble. I don't feel like I've succeeded at all. I feel like I'm just at the beginning now. And, maybe that sounds weird to somebody that's just starting out and, they don't see, the big payoff that they're hoping for. But I've never experienced somebody in my career that has come into a business and has been looking for that big, quick, easy payoff and has actually made it through to the other side and made a lot of money and been successful, because really it's all about hard work, right? Everyone's got talent to some level, and talent is very unimportant, in my opinion, when it comes to doing what we do in this business, because it's a grind and it's easy to get discouraged. It's all about hard work, and it's all about being obsessed with what you're doing and really wanting to succeed and doing everything in your power to succeed. That's what's going to push you over the top. So, yeah, have I felt discouraged? You're damn right I have. I mean, there's been tons of auditions that I've gone on where they just, basically, without saying it, told me that I sucked. And that's on the TD side, where I'll walk in and I'll do the audition, and I know before I've walked out of the room that I have fucking blown it. I mean, that sucked. There was one I'll tell you about. There was a show called Rock the Cradle on MTV. It was back when American Idol first got going. This was probably back in 2010, something like that. Maybe even, yeah, probably around that time. Maybe even before that. It was a show on MTV that had like all of these kids that were the children of rock stars, and that's why it was called Rock the Cradle. And Larry Rudolph, who was Britney Spears' manager for years and is once again, he was behind it along with all these other MTV executives. And I don't know what happened, but whoever the host was for the show ended up dropping out right before they were going to go. And like literally was going to start taping the following week. And so the producers were in a scramble. There was a couple of casting people that, helped to develop the show that knew who I was, because I'd sent them my reel a couple of times. And I'd just basically been bugging them about opportunities. And this host dropped out, and they're like, hey, will you please come down to L.A. today, because we want to audition you, and we're only going to audition you and one other person for this gig. Like, you really have a great shot at this. And so I felt fantastic, and I went down there, and I had, my shiny shoes on and my pressed shirt, and I was like, woo, like, I've got this. And I walked in all confident, like I had the lines memorized. And then they go, okay, are you ready? And I said, yeah, I'm ready. And they go, hang on a second. And they said, all right, guys, come on in. And there was like the entire staff of like MTV executives, and Larry Rudolph's there, and all of these big power players that I recognized. And I just fucking froze. Like I acted like I had all of the lines memorized, and they had cue cards for me to read, but I had refused to read off them because I wanted to show that I'd memorized all of the lines. And I just blew it. And I sucked. And they're like, okay, cool. We'll call you. We'll be in touch. And I knew walking out of that room that I just completely blown it. And like, that was frustrating, and that sucked. And, you know, I knew that I'd blown potentially a big opportunity. The other person that they auditioned, of course, got the gig. And, you know, that show ended up lasting one season anyhow. So it wasn't the end of the world. But, you know, like, those are moments where you never know if that's your Ryan Seacrest moment, if you will, with American Idol, where you got the show that all of a sudden becomes an international sensation. You know?
Yeah.
Have there been down moments? Of course. Like, it's never easy. Like, you have to learn to just kind of brush that shit off and just not really care. If there's people that are going to tell you that you're not good enough or that you blew it, you just have to be willing to accept the fact that you're not for everyone. You know, like, what I do is not for everyone. It's not for every producer that's producing a piece of programming. I don't fit into that puzzle, and I've learned that from being on the other side too, you know, as an actual producer that looks to cast talent in the programming that I create with my production company. There's plenty of talented people out there. It's just like sometimes I'm looking for a very specific thing, and it doesn't mean that one person is less talented than the next. It just means for my vision and what I'm looking for, this is what I want. And that's why, you know, I don't take it personally if I audition or if I send my stuff to an agent that I think I want this person to represent me, and they kind of blow me off or don't ever respond. I'm fine with that. Who cares? You know, there's plenty of people out there that are moving around lots of money, and if this person doesn't like me, well, you know what? Maybe the next one will.
How does getting an agent work? Like, do you approach them? Do they approach you? Do you get referred? Because I know nothing about this angle of the business. So how does that work?
Yeah, no, so it works kind of every single way that you just said. You can be referred, you can approach them, or they can approach you. What I've found, especially in this day and age, when everyone's got, you know, a reel and everyone's got a demo and everyone's got a podcast and everyone's got some form of programming that they do, you got to go out there and knock down doors. You know, you've got to go out there and get yourself in front of the people that you want to recognize you, because it's no one's job to come seek you out as the person that has all of the talent, right? Like, what sets people apart that really succeed, in my opinion, are the ones that are willing to be rejected, the ones that are willing to go out there and hang themselves out to dry. And if somebody tells them they suck, they can deal with it, you know, because that's going to happen, especially in a very cutthroat business like the entertainment business. So, yeah, I mean, you know, in Hollywood, there's a couple of big agencies that everyone wants to be at, like CAA and William Morris Endeavor. But frankly, the boutique agencies are much better for people that are just starting out. There's Abrams Artists, there's 3 Arts Entertainment, there's United, there's tons of great agencies that you can be with that will get you the type of gigs that you need when you're starting out. CAA is not taking a flyer on anyone. You know, William Morris isn't taking any risks with the clients that they're signing up. They're negotiating the huge deals, and they've got a reputation that carries itself. So they don't need somebody that's just starting out, because why would they want to do all that extra work when they don't have to? So trying to get with one of the big agencies is kind of a waste of time. But to answer your question, if you want an agent, go out there and find you an agent. Get in front of people. Keep sending demos. Keep sending updated materials with headshots and with reels and with content that you're producing, because that's what people are going to go, you know what, I can sell this, and if I can sell this, I'm going to get a piece of that. But it's your job as a talent to get out there and pound the pavement and find the people that are essentially going to be your salesperson.
Now, what is some advice, the best advice you've been given over the years, maybe from your agent or some of your mentors? Like, who's had your back since day one?
And there's been a couple of people that I've really looked up to. There's a guy named Diesel who is based out of WEND, the End in Charlotte. We used to work together when I was first starting out in Columbia, South Carolina. And, you know, I really looked up to him as a talent, and I still think that he's a great talent. He's always had my back. Moose is another guy. He does middays at the Rock in Kansas City. I think that he's a great talent. But you know what I've learned over the years is that, I mean, like, radio is a slow build medium. You know, if you're coming in to get rich quick, it'll never work. Does that work in TV? Sure. Can you get internet famous for a little while? Yes. And those things can happen overnight. Those things can happen quickly. With radio, it takes years and years and years of just grinding it out. But you also get, you know, 3-year contracts or 5-year contracts in radio if you reach a certain level where they're saying, hey, we'll give you 3 years to come into this market and prove you have what it takes. That never happens in TV. They don't go, hey, we'll give you 3 seasons to see if people like your shit. No way. Like, they'll cancel shows an episode into them. Like Ryan Seacrest's last show, the Knock Knock Live, do you even remember that? It was on Fox.
It bombed.
They canceled it after an episode. And that's Ryan Seacrest and a major production, that they were promoting all over the place. It bombed so bad they canceled it after an episode. Not a season, but an episode. So, I mean, just to give you an idea of, like, what basket you want to put your eggs in, I love radio because if you can convince somebody that you're willing to work hard and you've got a good vision and people are going to care if you just are given the time, radio, in my opinion, is the one medium where you actually get the shot to, like, build an established listening base over a couple of years. And that's what makes radio really unique. And that's what also allows me to be able to build all of the other ventures around it, So I love radio. I've always loved radio. But to answer your question in a roundabout way with what's the best advice that I've ever gotten, it's just that you've got to be willing to put in the work and you've got to love what you do, because if you're just stepping in going, hey, there's a lot of money in radio, and there is, but hey, there's a lot of money in radio, I want to get my hands on it. It doesn't work like that. You've got to pay your dues. You've got to work hard, and you've got to hustle constantly and not be afraid of rejection. Be willing to get out there and get your feelings hurt, because that's going to get you paid.
Yeah, man. What you just said is the advice that a lot of people tell me, but I'm trying to think outside the box on how to make myself a household name, because my ultimate dream is to be a show like yours or Howard or Opie where I'm the main person or I'm heard in a city. And it's just weird because I had Jim Norton on the show, and I thought I would do that at age 27. I'm just trying to think outside the box on how to find success, because I don't make a lot of money, and a lot of times my mom helps me, so I feel a little bit of pressure, but at the same time, she has my back, so that feels good. Do you know what I mean?
Listen, man, I follow what you do on social media. I think that you are absolutely onto something. So when you think about, it being the Hoppe Show, I love the name The Hoppe Hour. The one great piece of advice that I got from my manager, who manages all of my TV stuff out of Los Angeles, her name is Martha Costello, is that you have to create a brand. So when I say, who is Ryan Hoppe and what does Ryan Hoppe do? Like, what is the answer to that question? And you don't have to answer it right now, but that's what you have to be able to answer for other people. Because when people are thinking about buying you and making you that guy, they want to be able to comfortably know what they're buying, right?
Yeah.
And so the brand of Ryan Hoppe, what exactly is that? Because the way that talent buying works and the way the entertainment industry in general works is, unless you're a name like Brad Pitt or Scarlett Johansson that are who they are because they have, passed all of that, having their own brand, is, you have to have like a niche. Like, you've got to be great at something so people feel comfortable putting you into that role. And a lot of times, that's a specialized thing. Like for me, for many years, it was all about MMA. And I've still got this great MMA business that is running on its own now without me actually having to be the guy that's in front of the camera a lot of times, because I built this brand in the MMA space. But a lot of that was just doing kind of what you're doing right now, where I was out, walking around with a camera, interviewing people, not getting paid any or a lot of money, certainly, to do it, but I was passionate about it. You're on the right track with what you're doing, and you're going in the right direction, but you've got to figure out what your brand is, and you've got to be great at that brand and know exactly how to answer the question of who is Ryan Hoppe and what does he do.
At what point in your life did you realize what your brand was? Like, were you able to figure it out? Did it happen overnight? Like, how did it work for you?
Well, so there was a couple of things. Like for what I do with all of the sports broadcasting that I do, and even with what I do with the morning show, is I'm very much kind of the play-by-play guy. And that sort of works into that whole, me being the instigator and sort of driving the action, driving the fun. But I'm not like the over-the-top. That's Mahoney. He's that guy on the show in Houston. And then DK also adds her very own unique spin to it. But I think what figured it out for me was getting fired. It was back in 2007. think it's 2007. Yeah, I moved to Vegas, and I got a job with the WEC, which was World Extreme Cage Fighting. If you remember, that's where the likes of Donald Cerrone and Jose Aldo and all of those guys came from. But I actually got the job as one of their commentators when the UFC first bought the WEC. And the way that I got that gig is I happen to know some of the PR people from the UFC. And this was, back in 2007, the UFC was basically kind of just starting out, under the Dana White and Fertitta brother reign. The Ultimate Fighter had just happened. And so they were buying up this league, the WEC, but they were keeping it around. I remember I went into an office and I met with Dana White, and I met with a guy named Craig Bossari, and I met with a guy named Peter Dropic, who were all behind the WEC, and they were, trying to find the Mike Goldberg and the Joe Rogan for the WEC. And they asked me, they're like, hey, are you a play-by-play guy or a color guy? And I said, either one. And that was the wrong answer because they put me in the role of being the color commentator, and I'm just not a color commentator. I'm the play-by-play guy, and that's what I do, is that I learned after I got fired from that gig before the first episode even ever hit the air that I needed to be the play-by-play guy because that's what I do. And so being a play-by-play guy has been a big part of what I do throughout, my entire career, where when people ask me, hey, are you an analyst or are you the guy that's going to be hosting the show? I'm always the host. I'm always the straight guy who's going to drive the conversation, who acts as the traffic cop, who's going to help to make the conversation interesting if it hits a lull or move things along if it's getting boring. That's what I do as the on-air host that I am, right? But that's something that I had to figure out by getting fired. I had to go in there, and when they asked me, what do I do, instead of being like, oh, I can do it both, nobody wants somebody that can really do it both because they don't need you to be both. They need you to be one or the other. Which one are you? Like, are you the interesting one who offers up the ideas, that offers up the content, that offers up the funny one-liners, or are you the guy that's going to drive the conversation? That's a question that you can ask yourself, but think about every great sports broadcast that you've listened to. There is a play-by-play guy and there is a color guy. So if you think in the terms of the UFC, Mike Goldberg is the play-by-play guy. He's setting it up, and then Joe Rogan comes in and adds all of the color commentary and analysis on top of it. Looking at the NFL, Joe Buck is the play-by-play guy. He's the straight guy that's telling everyone what's going on, and then Troy Aikman is adding all of this other stuff on top of it. So with that in mind, you've got to figure out which one you are, and then you'll be able to really define your skills to other people much easier.
Now, where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? You do so much with MMA and radio and TV. Where do you want to see yourself in 2021?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, I really want to grow my production company, Farra Productions, to be able to do more programming where I'm not the person that's on screen. I'm the person that's behind the scenes. I would love to be hosting a national piece of programming that, is on a big scale with whether it's boxing or MMA or some sort of combat sports. I would love to be the driver in the seat if there's going to be more programming like that developed. I would love for the radio show in Houston to take and succeed, and I'd love to be able to syndicate the show out of Houston back to Las Vegas and to other markets. Being based on the West Coast for a long time like I was, very hard to syndicate, as you probably know, from the West Coast east, because you're 3 hours behind the East Coast. So you can't start a morning show at 9 a.m. and no one wants to get up and start doing a show at 3 a.m. Being based in Central Time, we've got all sorts of options, but we have to succeed here. So to answer your question, I want the radio show to kick ass in Houston, and then I want to be able to see it expand beyond Houston. I want to syndicate it, and I also would love to be doing more programming both on and off camera for MMA and for poker and for fantasy sports and just sports in general, because I don't feel like there's really a shelf life on being a good sports broadcaster. I think at certain points, you kind of run into a buzzsaw being the old guy that's trying to be young, and that's if you're doing pop culture programming. But in sports, if you've got a good knowledge base and you've got a good crew of people around you that trust you and that like you, you can do that until you're 75 years old.
Now, dude, how awesome is it to be a father of a young baby now? Like, how weird is it that one day you're just husband with a pregnant wife, and then the next day you're a father. Like, how surreal was that, Dave?
It's crazy, man. Everyone tells you what it's like to be a parent, right? Like for me, you tell people your wife's pregnant, and they're going to give you their opinion on what it's going to be like when you're a parent because of their experience. For me, it was very different than what anyone told me. Just because, I don't know, I mean, like, you can't really describe what it's like when you see your daughter for the first time. It's one of those moments that will be with me forever. And, sitting here and be holding this baby that's, now just a couple of days old, it's just surreal how much you love someone that you just met. But you realize that you have this tremendous responsibility, and it really is as beautiful as everyone tries to tell you that it is, even though you don't really believe it because you just don't know what to expect. You think that, it's going to be as amazing as everyone says, but until you really experience it, you don't really know what it's like until you see that little baby for the first time.
Now, without trying to be edgy, are you worried that she might keep you up at night and you won't be able to get sleep? Or since she's your kid, you'll be okay with that? Have you thought about that point at all?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, I've never really slept that much as it is. However, in this case, she's my daughter, so she gets passed. But my wife is great about that, too. I mean, my wife is obviously the one, especially at this point, that has to get up, take care of her because, I can't wake up and feed her. My boobs don't do that. So, my wife, regardless, has to be the one that gets up and takes care of her. But my wife, she's staying at home with our daughter to focus on that full time right now. So I feel very lucky that I'm in a position where, she's able to do that. And she obviously loves being a mom. Even this first weekend here, it's just been a pretty great experience watching her with our daughter. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm going to get woken up a little bit more throughout the night. But you know what? If I get woken up by a happy and healthy baby and mom, I'll take that any day of the week.
Now, before I let you go, where can people find all your work on the radio, online, and on TV? Everything you're up to. Yeah,
so, I mean, daily, like I said, we do a show that airs at 4 o'clock on the East Coast, 1 o'clock on the West Coast, 3 o'clock where I am here, Central Time. That's on Fantasy Sports Network. You can get it if you have an Apple TV 4. You can watch it, stream it on that. You can get it on Hulu and Xbox and all that good stuff. It is on some local carriers here in the States that covers all of Canada. And then you can also stream it on FantasySportsNetwork.com. For the morning show, which airs 6 to 10 a.m. Central Time, that's just if you go to any TuneIn app or the Radio.com app and you search KHMX, that's Mix 96.5. We're on for 4 hours a day in the morning. And then, like I said, the MMA Awards, those are coming up not this Friday, but next Friday we'll be live in Las Vegas for that. And then the following Friday, the 12th, that'll be on Fox Sports Networks. So check your local listings for that as well. And, and it's, I'm all over the place. And if you just keep up with me on Twitter, at Dave Farra, that's where I post kind of about when everything is happening. And you can also go to DaveFarra.com. I got a bunch of stuff up there as well.
Well, dude, keep up the good work. I'm glad that we got to meet and I guess, quote unquote, network at the Morning Show Boot Camp, even though it was more drinking and having a good time. And hopefully I'll be able to make the one this year in Atlanta.
Yeah, bring your tall ass up there, man. I'd love to see you again and buy you 9 more drinks. That'll be fun.
Sounds like a plan, man. Keep up the good work, dude.
All right, Hoppy. Have a great one, man.
You too. Thanks, Dave.
That's it.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.